Thanks for joining us for our Evoke Ski and Skimo chat this evening. And tonight we have Coach Luke Nelson and Coach Nikki and myself, Coach Kylee, to answer the questions that you've submitted. So I just want to quickly start by introducing the coaches, and then we'll dive right into the questions. So, Coach Nikki, can you tell us quickly about some of your Skimo races you've done, just in case someone wants to contact you about a specific race?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. If you want to turn your cameras on, we invite it. It's a lot of black. I've been racing it's been about almost 15 years, which is remarkable. All right, Raul, yes, turned his camera on. Thanks for doing that. I've done most of the races in Colorado and on the Cosmic circuit. So the Colorado sort of circuit locally here, and I've raced that would also include Power of Four, which is a pretty well-known race, and the Grand Traverse a number of times. And then I've raced in a couple world championships over in Italy and Switzerland. So yeah, that would be it. So any of those little Colorado races, some in Utah as well.
Great. And Luke, what's your experience with the Skimo and ski touring?
So I spent about 8 years very seriously competing in the Skimo scene, raced all the races in the United States, was able to nab a national championship in the middle of that, and then represented the U.S. On the world's team or on the world stage for 2 races in Pelvoux, France, and Clout, Italy. So raced some of the world championship races there. And now awesome. I spend an awful lot of time touring around and a lot of split boarding.
Sweet. No, that's good. Yeah, and I think many of you guys know myself, but my expertise probably lies in high-level Skimo racing at the World Cups and Grand Course racing. Last year I was 4th at Pyrmenta. I've done Metsalama, PDG, so European Grand Course racing would be in my wheelhouse if that's questions you have. So let's dive right into our questions here. So I'm going to start with Nikki with this one. Do GPS watches, heart rate monitors interfere with avalanche transceivers? And is it dangerous to track a backcountry ski workout?
Yeah, I saw that question earlier, and Kylee sent that over, and I actually looked into that a little bit because I didn't want to give any wrong answers. I think I would say at the forefront of this question, it's probably good for everybody to look into this stuff just so they understand for themselves and aren't reliant on hearsay or what anyone else is saying. But as far as I can gather, anything metal or electronic has the potential to cause interference with the transceiver. So probably the bigger it is or the closer it is to your actual beacon, it would become more problematic. But I was reading that even a goo wrapper can potentially cause issue. So something that innocuous can be problematic. So certainly a heart rate monitor, a watch does have the potential. I can't say how significant that is. I think from an anecdotal standpoint, the fact that I don't hear a lot about that being problematic makes me think it's not this huge concern necessarily. But again, I want to caution everyone by saying that is probably something we all should dig into deeper. And the literature is clear that it does have the potential to cause problems. So I'd say the answer is yes. Good to think about. And if Kylee or Luke, you have any thoughts on that, I'd of course love to hear.
I was involved with teaching an avalanche course this weekend, and electronic devices was something heavily discussed. any of those have the potential, radios, watches, any of these electronics we carry. The good news is if you can get it away from your beacon when it's in search or in transmit mode by at least 10 inches, most of that reduction will be reduced. If you're searching, you want to get it further away. The further away, the better, frankly. So if you are actively involved with the rescue, getting it 20 to 30 inches is ideal to limit that. And another good thing you can do is you could always go test it. Put your stuff on with a beacon, do a search, take that stuff off, do another search, and see if you are seeing some interference.
Sure. And Luke, just one thing came to mind when you were talking was if you are actively searching, having your cell phone off or in airplane mode. I know the question wasn't about a cell phone, but I think cell phones are probably the most problematic thing that we typically carry. So that's also important to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I train with my heart rate monitor on, and I put my beacon in my pants pocket. So, and in my pants pocket, the beacon's kind of near my knee. So there's quite a bit of separation. I feel comfortable with that, but again, like Nikki and Luke said, do some research on your own, some practice, and kind of figure it out. The next question we have is best way to build leg strength pre-season so you don't spend a few weeks with weak legs on the downhill. I'll tackle this one. In all of our training programs, we generally start people out with general strength. So I would do a general strength workout for a block, so 3 to 4 weeks. And so that's upper and lower body strength, squats, sorry, there's people coming in. Squats, deadlifts, single leg squats, Bulgarian split squats, all of these are good basic leg strength exercises. And then a lot of our programs layer in muscular endurance after. So muscular endurance is a really good workout specific to Skimo that helps you prepare for the repetitive demands of the uphill movement, as well as that sort of static downhill position. So I think pre-season, that would be my go-to. Some basic strength and then a block of muscular endurance. In a nutshell, everyone is different. So there's some fine tuning depending on your ski history. Yeah, anything to add, Luke, Nikki?
That sounds great. Yeah, that's what I'd highly recommend.
Yeah. Okay. This one's for you, Luke. I've heard anywhere from 1K feet to 1,500 feet per hour is a reasonable skin pace while on guided trips. In zone 2, I'm painfully slow as a sea level athlete, though slowly getting faster. Is an average pace, depending on conditions, of course, of 1,500 feet per hour in zone 1 for someone almost 50 a reasonable goal? Last year in a race, I did 1K feet in 30 minutes and was probably in something stupid like zone 4 plus. Maybe you can summarize that question a little bit too.
I think that question is trying to get to what's a reasonable pace to be able to do within your aerobic capacity. And I would say that, first of all, it very much depends on your objectives. It's very different preparing for a race versus guided ski touring. I think that guided agencies or ski guides are going to be putting out some numbers that they hope that their clients can achieve comfortably. So setting a benchmark like that for yourself is totally reasonable. When we start kind of unwrapping or pulling the threads of that question, it sounds like one thing that needs to be addressed is just aerobic capacity generally. There may be a little aerobic deficiency syndrome there that we would want to address with a lot of zone 1, zone 2 work to try to essentially build that efficiency in those paces. I think that's probably where I would start, but the goal seems reasonable that about 1,500 an hour would be something achievable in zone 2 with training for someone about 50.
Nikki, this one is for you, and it's about ankle weights. Are ankle weights helpful to add base aerobic work only in the higher intensity strength workouts or all the time?
Yeah, well, first I'm going to give Meg and Brandon a shout out for turning their cameras on. So now we have 3. Thanks, guys. Ankle weights, that's a funny question in terms of, I don't think there's a clear answer on this one. I also looked into this a little bit. I do have a good friend who uses ankle weights and believes in them wholeheartedly. Because he said his race setup, for example, he's a Skimo racer, he's got approximately 2.5 pounds on each foot. And so it made sense to him to train typically preseason with an approximate amount on his feet. And that, I guess that made sense to me. But then reading some online forums, I had seen a lot of people saying they were having knee issues from doing ankle weights. So I would just caution people that it sounds like there is some risk to that, and maybe easing into it by just trying it with a session or 2. I myself admittedly have never tried ankle weights before. And then one thing that came to mind for me is the modality of running or even hiking with ankle weights. Say you were using them preseason, it is different than skinning uphill. I know they're comparable, and for the sake of training, it makes sense to be running to train for Skimo, but truly the mechanism, the locomotion is quite different. So I think that's important to keep in mind. But Kylee and Luke, I'm curious if you two have used them and your thoughts on that, because I don't know if I'm not informed about that specifically. So
yeah, I've never actually used ankle weights as a training modality for Skimo. If I've used any sort of weighted workouts, it would be a muscular endurance, like weighted vest kind of workout or a weighted backpack. I've never specifically attached anything to my ankles. I know Coach Jack has played around with this a bit, and maybe we can follow up on Instagram with a take from him. But yeah, no, not something I've specifically used. And I certainly wouldn't use it actually with skis. I think it could really mess up your technique, frankly, with your Skimo gear. And I don't know why you'd add extra weight, but yeah. Luke, have you used them?
Nope, never used them. Completely agree with your thoughts there. If someone's just really hurting for some dryland training to try to mimic Skimo movements, I'd recommend buying a pair of roller skis and mount it with some Dynafit toe pieces. Go roll around on the sidewalks with your kit on. I may or may not have done a couple 100 miles of that each season preparing for Skimo season.
That's awesome. Yes, that's great. Yeah, good thought, Kylee, to follow up with Jack. He actually was here last winter, and I saw him in our rec center with his ankle weights on the stair climber. So yes, let's Jack.
Okay, we'll do that. And so the next question we have is, can you go over some of the key differences in training for ski mountaineering and Skimo races, and how you'd suggest someone structure a plan if they have goals in both arenas? So I'll start tackling this one. Myself, and I think Nikki and likely Luke, we do fall into this category. Although we do Skimo race a lot, we also backcountry ski as well. And depending on the season, have had racing and ski mountaineering goals. So specific to your question about how you structure a plan, I mostly train with my Skimo gear because it's a better aerobic workout and I can target heart rate zones. However, if I have a technical ski mountaineering goal or traverse, I'll do some of my long zone 1 training with maybe heavier gear, or if my race gear, if it pertains to that, but in a backcountry setting, because I think the thing that can't be overlooked is the skill set that you need for the ski mountaineering, and that does need to be practiced. You can't just run up groomers and then expect to navigate glacier terrain, steep couloirs, rappels, etc. So I think at least once a week, having a skills focused day. So that looks like going out and skiing a couloir or going on a glacier, depends on what your goal pertains to. So I think you can get a lot of the fitness with Skimo style training, and then complement that with once to twice a week fun skiing, so to speak. That's what I call it. And so that would be the main difference for me, is just adding in more fun skiing. Kind of, I don't know, Nikki, Luke.
That was a beautiful answer.
Yeah, that was good, Kylie. I agree. I think off-piste skiing's really critical to do. And I think especially the stimulus for the downhill, like at least as far, I'm in Breckenridge and our uphill routes are limited to blue runs. So there's frankly no real stimulus for downhill skiing. So I think riding chairlifts is really a wise thing to do for Skimo. I think they're a major low-hanging fruit piece for a lot of racers is the descending. They spend so much effort, you know, shaving off 1% or 2% a time uphill, but then can lose so much more if they're not putting the time and energy into practicing descents that are hard and replicating the efforts. Oh, hi, little girl. Replicating the efforts that we see or the demand we see in races. So.
Yeah, for sure. The only caution I would give that I've run into training for both Skimo and ski mountaineering is your volume can get off the charts if you're not careful. So be cognizant of proper rest days, I would say, for some people, because a lot of times ski touring or mountaineering days are in excess of 4 to 8 hours. It's a long time out there. So just keep that in mind. Now a question for Luke. So someone is asking how to treat a day of fun lift skiing. For athletes who aren't trying to podium, just maximize and balance fun with friends and family, how would you replace one workout a week with lift skiing?
I think that actually kind of ties into what you were getting at a little bit with your other question, right? If you're going to tie a day in, it should be a day that you would maybe sacrifice an easy hour aerobic and let that be a skills day. And the real key here is if you are somewhat serious about doing some racing, to ski with your family in your Skimo gear. So you're getting specificity out of that fun activity. Fully recognizing that Skimo gear may not always be the funnest setup to ski on, but it's a really specific thing that you need to be able to learn how to do well to race well.
Yeah, and I would say if you're not using Skimo gear and you're just regular skiing and you're skiing a hard day of downhill skiing, I would classify that as some form of strength training. So I would treat it like that in your workout. If you're, you know, hammering runs kind of for 5 to 6 hours with your teenage kids or something, your legs are going to be sore the next day, and I would treat it as a form of strength.
I love that different viewpoints that we had on that. I was envisioning skiing with like young children and kind of like maybe on the bunny slopes, like super chill aerobically. And then you have this like, oh, I got to keep up with the teenagers like hammering, and very different, right? So the same applied thing there could be very different impacts to your training.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my kids are getting towards that age that I'm holding on for dear life sometimes. So it's a workout downhill skiing now. Yeah. So another question we have, I'm gonna direct this one to you, Nikki. It's one that was submitted today. But what is the minimum amount of time ascending to be effective aerobic training? Is ascending less than 35 minutes then swapping to skiing going to give me optimal results?
Uh, that would depend on the goal. So I don't think I can actually answer that unless I know what this person's goal is. If they're just doing a vertical race, that might be adequate. But if they're doing, a long course race, that would probably not suffice. So I'm sorry to say, I don't know quite how to answer that. But I think, people, you can adjust goals based off of what time you have available. So if that's all you can do, I still think you could achieve some success in races. Because I know a lot of people, this is probably getting off track, but just don't have a lot of time, don't live near snow, etc. And that can make this sport particularly challenging. So yeah, sorry. I'm not sure I had enough info to really give a good answer.
Yeah, I think further to that, they said to be effective aerobic training, and I think Nikki nailed it on the head there, that you are using your aerobic system, even if you're going for 35 minutes, there is some value. So I'd encourage this person to do an aerobic threshold test to see if they have aerobic deficiency, because that determines too maybe how much zone 2 or low intensity work you might need to do. But yeah, maybe shoot us some more info via DM on Instagram and we can help you out a bit more. The next question, maybe Luke, you could address this since you're into the slipboarding now as well. We talk about how touring with heavy gear quickly becomes a muscular endurance workout more than aerobic base workout. That being said, how would you create a backcountry touring ME workout? Could you recommend an ascent speed, intervals, etc. if I'm using heavy gear?
Well, just by nature, using heavy gear is going to be an ME workout, right? And the longer you go, the more impactful or deeper in the well that's going to drag you. So just by walking uphill with heavy gear, you're going to get that. If you want to increase that stimulus, mixing in a couple of intervals where you're picking up that pace for a couple of minutes at a time with a decent rest in between. But all of that is primarily going to be hitting that muscular endurance system. As opposed to with lighter gear, you're going to be able to stay more aerobic in the systems that you're drawing from. Mm-hmm. So it's easy. Just ski in heavy gear for ME.
Yeah, that was an interesting question because I've never actually thought of specifically using heavy gear for your ME, but it actually could work. I mean, I've felt that effect personally when I go ski touring on my big powder skis and then come back to my Skimo skis. I have a lot of residual fatigue, but I do feel kind of the strength effect, if that makes sense. So if you have many setups, could be a tactic for your ME. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just caution folks to make sure that that's not what you're doing all the time, because your technique for moving quickly or efficiently will get wrecked. You end up just not having good glide, not having good turnover. So if Skimo racing is the goal, limiting that to not too often, once a week or less.
Yeah, we had someone submit a question in the chat here while we were talking, and it says, Nikki and Kylee, how tall are you and what length poles do you use? And how does that change between snow condition, terrain, and race type? And Nick Luke, sorry, maybe answer this question as well for the male height. Do you want to start, Nikki?
Sure. I'm about 5'7", and my poles are, I have 2 pair. I think one pair is probably around 122 centimeters, and then one's around 125. So it would depend on, I guess I'd think about the general side sort of slope angle or track angle. Like in Europe, I found that the tracks were lower angle. They were more switchbacks. They don't just shoot straight up the way that they do in the United States. So a longer pole seemed like a better choice to me. Whereas in the US with steeper skin tracks, a little bit shorter, tended to work better. And then I think something like if you're just doing a vertical race, it's good to think about the pole length you want to optimize your glide in technique when you don't even have to worry about descending at all. So, oh, there's a really good article there's a website called skintrack.com, and they did a whole article on pole length that I thought was good.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with Nikki. That article is really good. Just Google it. Skimo pole length will bring it up. I'm 5'6", and my poles I use 130s for individual racing. I don't like super long poles for technical descending. Kind of feels like javelins. But I use 135 for vertical and sprint racing. So I'd say I'm on the longer end for my height. And then I use Lucky poles for verticals, but I don't use that sort of clip-in style for sprint racing. Many people don't put their wrist straps back on for the boot packs because it's takes 2 seconds, which you don't have to put on. But some people do use Lucky for sprint, but you would have to really practice it. So that's just kind of getting very specific there, but something to think about.
Before Luke answered, I'd chime in really quick. So just as an example, Kylie's a hair shorter than me using a longer pole. So there is obviously some space for preference. And also I think height is obviously a great metric to use for this, but wingspan should be considered as well. You just might not be the same as your fellow racer who's the same height.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 5'9". I raced in the US with 130s and in Europe with 135s. That similar thoughts to Nikki. That in Europe, the lower angle stuff, I got a little bit better power out of a little bit longer pole. But like Kylie said, I don't like the javelins on the steeper stuff, which we had to tend to happen more in North America. And for ski touring, particularly with splitboarding, I'm 125. So even shorter because I'm not trying to stride it out as much.
Great. We had another question in our chat, a nutrition question. Someone asked, what's our latest thinking in terms of carb, protein, calorie input for not bonking during all-day tours, 5,000 feet of vert or 10+ hour? They're thinking big mountain missions like Rainier, Baker in a day. This person does less racing, but big ski tours. So maybe I'll let Luke tackle this one to start with, because you've done quite a bit of long duration stuff.
I'm going to say that it's certainly part of this is going to depend on how efficiently and how quickly you're trying to move. If the goal is pushing quickly, fast all day, I would lean more into a carbohydrate heavy nutrition plan. Personally, I'm a fan of gels. They go down easy. They don't freeze too bad in the winter. And so, getting as many calories at source. If it's a long, fun ski mission, man, put a sandwich in your bag, stop and take in the views. And don't worry about nutrition as the key, as opposed to just having some fuel in the oven. Some of the thoughts, if I was to pull from kind of the running space, that were north of 250 calories an hour is the ideal for highest output. And some of the top pros in the ultra running space are doing 300 to 400 an hour. Very carbohydrate heavy, not hardly any proteins or fats with that. Just fast, hot fuel.
Thanks. It's dinner time here in our house, so that was on my mind, the nutrition one. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, I'd agree with Luke in the more speed-oriented ones I've done, like Rogers to Bugs, or in our area, there's a mountain called Columbia, which is about a 3,000-meter day. And speed pushes is almost all carbohydrates, 60 to 80 grams per hour is what I aim for. And I mean, don't take maybe the nutritional advice, but I'm on the Snickers program like Killian. So yeah, like candy, Snickers. I don't think you have to get expensive and fancy, sorry, nutrition companies, but if you start to read the back of common foods that are cheaper, I think you can get away with not breaking the bank too. Yeah. What do you
I
think,
agree
Nick?
with all that. Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I think I like real food on longer efforts. I think even if I'm trying to move quickly, if it's as long as was described in the question, I think real food is a nice incentive, and it just makes your trip a little more fun. I love like peanut butter and jelly, totally keeping it simple, salty things, just I think whatever you've got is good. Just like protein, carbohydrate, fat, probably like leaning in on that carbohydrate piece. Yeah, loosely trying to go for that. Kylee, I'm with you, 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That, of course, depends on how big a person is, how tolerant your gut is to the amount of carbohydrate it can consume. I mean, the gold standard used to be 60, but as we've seen with like tour riders, that number just keeps going up and up and up. What these pro athletes can tolerate. So it's probably good to try to figure that out for yourself if you're really wanting to take a deep dive into nutrition, what you can tolerate. So I'm talking grams of carbohydrate. So
yeah, I would last
Thanks.
thing on this for me, I would say one of the cruxes for myself with Speed Mission actually hasn't been food, it's been water. It's hard to drink, I find, when you're in a snow environment. Melting snow is slow. There's not streams everywhere. So I think paying attention to how much water you're intaking starting from the start is important, though, if you're doing 10 plus hours. So that's just consideration. There's another question in our chat here, which I actually like since we all have children. Someone said, what category of workout would you put skiing with a kid trailer? Any ideas for how to maximize this training type? So maybe we can just briefly speak to training and with kids for those people who have them. So Nikki?
Well, I'd say skiing with your kid is a booty workout because that will light your bum on fire. It's like so uncomfortable. I mean, my experience with that is it's exhausting. Like it's so hard to even do that for an extended amount of time. So I think if go for it. I think trying to find flat terrain would be your friend in that case. But I mean, on a more philosophical level, I think trying to do anything with your children, the key is probably not getting too attached to the workout or having a firm expectation for the workout, because as we all know with kids, it will absolutely go sideways, like and the plan will not get executed as one would hope. So I think just like holding it loosely and having fun with it and giving yourself grace and not being frustrated with your kids.
Yeah.
Those are my takeaways.
Yeah, when I pushed or pulled kids, like pushed in a stroller or pulled in a pulk for skiing, I considered it like muscular endurance or interval training, because it's the energy demands are so much higher, and nap times, that was kind of my go-to. Take them out at nap time, but it's now my kids are 10 and 12 now, so I don't have to pull them around anymore. Mm-hmm. How about you, Luke?
I was just trying to find a picture of me pulling kids around on those terrible roller ski things that I talked about with Skimo bindings on them.
Right.
And fully agree. Nap time's the best time. I think for a while my kids just would love napping while I was training because I could put him in the trailer and you pull him around for a little bit and that kind of rhythmic pull puts him to sleep. But absolutely strength training or hard intervals, it will crush you doing too much of that. And my mind was blown if someone actually skate skiing that way. I can barely skate ski with nothing behind me, and trying to pull someone on skate skis, like that might be the hardest workout you could dream of.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah, no, thanks guys. Yeah, no, I'm a new-ish dad. It's the first winter, and so yeah, the skate ski workouts are hard. Classic is better. But yeah, there's options. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Zach, find that flat track.
Yep.
Yeah, good on you, Zach. We love seeing parents out there with their kids, and congrats on being a dad. Such an awesome journey.
Yeah, no, thanks guys.
I would say like having your kid in a backpack though it's almost perfect muscular endurance training, as far as if any of the folks on this call have seen the video of Scott demonstrating a muscular endurance workout where he's carrying, I think it was something around 30% of his body weight up a very steep incline. I mean, that taking your kid up a mountain or even a hill is such great training, and it's I think a really creative way to maybe watch your kids and get some training in, or bring them along, whatever the motive is. But it's great work to do.
For sure. We just have a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. But I'm going to ask Nikki this one to start. How do you choose a partner for a team's Skimo race?
Yeah, that again, it depends on the goal. So in my estimation, I think if you're trying to optimize how well you can do in a team's race, say you're feeling really competitive, and you want to do really well, I think the key is matching strengths with a fellow partner. It becomes difficult if your strengths and weaknesses are opposing or not in line, just because you're generally as a team weaker. But I think if you can align with someone, say you're better at climbing and you're not as great on the downhill, or you're a little less fit climbing but stronger on the downhill, I think finding those matches is a really good way to go. But if the goal is just to have an experience, I think anyone is great. I think whoever seems to be the best company is great. I mean, and then this question, you could really take a deep dive, because another piece of it is I really like racing with my husband because it takes the pressure off for me. Like, I often find with partner races, I feel a lot of pressure to not let my partner down and make sure I'm training. And that became tricky for me with young children. It just wasn't as predictable how well I could train. So I found that training or racing with my husband worked well, because he is not gonna be that upset if I'm not up to snuff when we're racing. So I think even like the psychological component or comfort component is something worthwhile to think about, even outside of the physical capacity.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nikki. I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what's your goal out of the race? From a pure performance perspective, like if you're looking to place in a grand course style race, or maybe a world championships teams race, the worst pairing actually is people who have opposite skills. So someone who's a really good uphill skier paired with a really good downhill skier, you're as good as your weakest link. So people who are actually the most similar seem to make better partners. And I've had all sorts of partner racing experiences, but to be honest, the ones where we performed the worst is when one person was a really strong downhill skier and the other person was not. And it's very, very challenging. There's a lot of waiting, and overall you're slower. The other thing I would throw in there is, even at the highest levels, people tow. So don't ever be afraid with a team's partner if they're a little bit weaker. Throw them on a rope. I've seen the world champions tow each other. It's standard practice in our sport. So there's no pride there. So get that bungee out and get as fast as you can as a team. Do you have
Those are
anything?
great insights. Yeah, I think same goals and as close to same capacities if the objective is to race hard. And Kylie, that's beautiful insight with the towing. Sometimes even if those are really matched up, somebody might not be having that day, or it might not just be their climb, and being able to not have ego get in the way and drop off, but instead just latch together and work as a team. So real critical there.
Yeah. I think the last question here, Luke, for you, and this one is, how does Skimo racing differ from ultra running? Lots of people use it as cross training, but from an energy systems perspective, they seem different.
I actually say from energy systems, similar, though maybe not to ultra running, unless we're specifically talking about the grand courses or the long races. I would equate it more to like a sky running race or something of the sub ultra distance, just because the intensities are so much higher than what you'd see in an ultra marathon. For example, a team's race or an individual race, it's potentially a 2-hour-ish effort, which if anybody's running ultras in those times, they should have some contracts. So maybe a little bit more into that higher end, faster speed work. But in a lot of ways, it does make for great cross training because you are working that aerobic capacity and your turnover speed. The difference really comes down to the impact on the body, and where a lot of people get themselves in trouble is if they use Skimo as their training all winter and come off of Skimo training with this great engine and aerobic capacity and jump right into the same volume of running, and their tendinous structures and legs just aren't ready to handle it. And so it's an immediate recipe for injury. And so finding a way, as either the Skimo season is tapering down, to sprinkle in some running to kind of get those tendinous structures ready to go, or giving yourself some time to do a new build with the running capacity when you finish the Skimo season would be really important to stay injury free and maximize that time, that transition.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think people really underestimate the specificity of running. So I tell my athletes I coach, don't put an A race until the summer if you're a Skimo racer, if you want to really perform kind of over 50K. Like, it takes a while.
I was going to add, I think the eccentric loading is missing with Skimo, like descending, especially running. I don't think you'd feel prepared to do that at all coming off of skis. But another thing I've noticed, and this might just be my own modality and the way my body works, but I'll have, in the middle of a Skimo season, when I'm ascending like thousands and thousands of feet, you'd think I'd be great going uphill. But what I've noticed is if I'm doing that and I go out to Moab, for example, and there's this slick rock ramp called Moab Rim, and we love doing it. It's only a mile long. It's like 800 feet tall. But what I notice is if I do that even once hard, my glute meads, so like the top of my glutes are super sore. So clearly, like back to that locomotion piece, while they look and appear to be so similar, running uphill and skiing uphill are different. And the muscular demand is different as well. So yeah, it takes some adaptation to switch.
Yeah, and I know we all on Instagram and in the media see people like Remy Bonnet and Killian, and who seem to just jump from high-end Skimo racing to running racing really rapidly and do very well, and they do. But I would imagine they keep a certain amount of running mileage in their program or towards the running season to account for that. I think we're speaking more to people who are specifically just Skimoing in the winter. I don't know, Luke, what would be your take on those outliers?
Well, I would actually point to a really specific example of one of those outliers, and for me, a really historic event and kind of how it all went down. If we look back at Transvolcania, I think it was 2014. Kilian had just come off of one of the most impressive dominance in Skimo racing. 3 weeks or 2 weeks before Transvolcania, he did a couple of runs, showed up, raced extremely well for the first 2.5 or 3 hours, and then fell apart and lost to Dakota Jones. And Kilian blamed that on his not doing any running to prepare himself for it, both from the heat perspective and from the impact perspective. So if you watch what Kilian does really closely, and he talks about this on his website, his Mountain Athlete site, he is doing 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 treadmill runs at the very minimum throughout the whole Skimo season now, so he can make that transition faster. So it's kind of cloak and dagger there. They're running and Skimoing, but their specificity is the Skimo for that season. But keeping some of the tendinous impact going the right way so they can transition quickly.
Mhm.
Can I ask a really quick follow-up question on that? Like, as coaches, do you ever add in running during people's Skimo seasons, or do you try and keep them super specific?
If I was to address athletes that I'm working with right now who have running goals this summer, absolutely. Running is twice a week. They're substituting some easy aerobic work, and the specificity of the hard work's all done on skis. But to help with that transition at the end of the season, trying to keep the stimulus incorporated for sure.
Yeah, in the same way, further to I'm training some mountain bikers, not running, but same thing. They're on the trainer twice a week, even though they're mostly on Skimo skis. I think staying in touch with whatever your A goal is. So if you're a runner, running, if you're a cyclist, cycling is pretty key all year long.
Meg, too, I offer the treadmill. I think it's a great alternative if the weather's really poor. Like we've had some horrendous weather here the last 48 hours where you would be a fool to be out in it. It's like borderline dangerous. So I often utilize the incline treadmill. I think 25 degrees, 30 degrees is great. I have one athlete who doesn't have access to very steep terrain to train, but he's doing a race where there is quite a steep climb. So we have him do some sessions that are at 30 degrees on the incline treadmill. I think it's great. Again, it's not optimal, but it's, I think, a creative solution and the best we can do for what his situation is. So, and you can watch TV, which I love doing. Love TV.
So do I. It's good. It's good. Podcasts too.
I'll admit it's a total guilty pleasure. I did a marathon training block last winter, and I was so excited to do treadmill workouts because I got into a couple of Netflix series. It was amazing.
Yes.
I know when I was asking Luke about Ted Lasso, I was like, when did he have time to ever watch that? Now I know. I
Doing
know.
Canova progressions on the treadmill with it.
There you go. Yeah.
As much as we laugh, if it motivates you to do it, like use it. I mean,
Never
a good
missed a workout.
is such an effective training tool.
For sure. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for our Skimo Coaches Corner. If we didn't answer your question as completely as you'd like, follow up with us a DM on Instagram. We love to always hear from you. If you if this has sparked more questions, feel free to book coaching consults with any one of the Evoke coaches, and we're happy to help you. So hope you have a good evening, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.